Mary Price. It is May 30th, 2007, and I'm interviewing Dick Lear in his home in Denham Springs, Louisiana, and we're talking about the building of the Bucky Dome in Baton Rouge.
Then they decided to build a new plant in Baton Rouge, and the president called me in one day and he says, "Now I'm going to take you out of the mechanical department, and you're going to work for me, and we're going to build a plant down there that we can be proud of, and it's going to be different than anything they've ever built before."
I remember riding over the Mississippi River Bridge into Baton Rouge at night. The sky was lit up like Christmas by all the chemical plants. I remember the Coca-Cola sign downtown, the power lines that disappear into the horizon over Lake Pontchartrain. I remember the old Hickory Lodge, where the story goes Andrew Jackson slept here. Growing up in the suburbs, you could just as well be living in Baton Rouge or Jackson or Tuscaloosa. What makes this place unique? The lodge was a building we used to drive by on the way to roller skating or the grocery store. It was a daily reminder of our rich regional history and connection to a greater American history. But the lodge was torn down 20 years ago and turned into a gas station. And now, even the gas station is gone. And yet, this landscape remains full of history, and not just plantation homes. Growing up, I remember hearing little bits and pieces, rumors really, of a huge futuristic dome hidden in the woods, somewhere north of town.
300 years of settlements and governance by 7 nations has created strange juxtapositions in the South Louisiana landscape. The French Arpent land divisions fan out along the river, while the American grid overlies the British meets and bounds. As the last high ground that never floods before the Gulf of Mexico, and with the Mississippi River navigable by ocean-going tankers up to this point, Baton Rouge grew as a centre for the petrochemical industry. Thousands of miles of pipelines and access canals crisscross the coastal wetlands carrying oil and natural gas from the offshore platforms to these refineries. And while digging and installing these pipelines has caused immense damage to the environment, the petrochemical industry has fueled the economy of Baton Rouge. The port of South Louisiana is the busiest port in the Western Hemisphere, and Baton Rouge is the site of one of the world's largest oil refineries. It is from this point that oil is distributed by road and rail within the central United States. The railroad tank cars that carry the product require periodic maintenance. In the mid-1950s, the Standard Oil plant was expanding, and its on-site tank car maintenance facility, operated by the Chicago-based Union Tank Car Company, needed a new home. A young engineer by the name of Dick Lear was assigned to design a new state-of-the-art facility and to oversee its construction. Typically, these buildings were laid out in a straight line, one car in, one car out, and this was not very efficient. But Lear had the novel idea of putting the cars on a turntable, rotating them from station to station, allowing up to 36 cars to be in different stages of service at any one time.
One of the problems I had in the beginning was that there are a number of shops that have to go with each place. In order to accommodate those shops, I set the circular track off-center and had a crescent left around the edge so that it accommodated the shops, the wheel shop, the cleaning shop, and all the others.
There was a design issue: how to cover the turntable and the shops without the need for an extensive network of supports. As it turns out, Lear's boss, Edwin Locke, the president of Union Tank Car, had a connection with Buckminster Fuller, the visionary thinker and inventor of the geodesic dome. The geodesic dome is a building type based on the structural interdependence of the forces of tension and compression, resulting in a form that is extremely strong, yet relatively lightweight. Their development resulted from Fuller's explorations into interlocking geometric forms found in nature, notably triangles and tetrahedrons. During World War II, Ed Locke had worked with Bucky Fuller under President Truman to develop these domes for the military.
Mr. Locke had worked with Bucky Fuller during the war. He said he had some dome types of things. He said, let me call him and have him come out and talk with you and see what you think. So Bucky came out and we spent the day together. The letter that I had sent to Locke after Bucky was here, it wasn't very complimentary. I wasn't sure that he knew what he was doing, and being at that time a 33-year-old smart aleck, I knew all the answers.
Thinking was always evolutionary. What my father felt he was exploring in the geodesic structures were really nature's building principles. One shouldn't get misled by thinking that the geodesic dome was the only thing that he was concerned about. It was an example of developing tools for solving critical problems, or he called himself a comprehensive anticipatory design scientist.
Bucky was blind until he was 8. And then they finally found they got glasses for him. But he learned structural engineering by feeling the strength of different forms, triangles, rectangles. The fact that he was blind as a child got him to look at things differently than an engineer would have been trained to do.
Probably in terms of a typical architectural process, my father was much more hands-on than normal.
He valued collaboration. A lot of the ideas that he used and that we associate with him were not wholly his ideas, but things that had come up in collaboration with people. So I don't know that he had the idea to do the dome in that way, because that was obviously a symbol of the future.
I really don't think that Bucky could have built that dome himself.
Fuller and Union Tank Car assembled a design team consisting of Bucky's company Synergetics out of Raleigh, North Carolina, Chicago architects Batty and Childs, industrial designer George S. Hunt, and a theatrical lighting designer from New York City, Abe Feder, critical for a building without windows. Finally, the Nichols Construction Company was hired to build the dome, primarily based on its experience building local chemical plants. Because the offshore oil industry requires everything to be custom and welded, there was a supply of welders and a supply of raw material. The dome would be built on-site, handcrafted to Lear's design.
I decided that we would use the same metal that we used on the insulation jackets, which went around the tank car. We were buying such a volume of that I thought that would be a good buy. So we made all of those pieces. They shipped the raw material in, the pipes and the rods and the sheet metal. We made them from scratch. The foundation consists of 80 18-inch bell-bottom pilings. Then on top of those is a 4-foot square ring, and the ring had so many rebars in it that we had to use pea gravel aggregate in the concrete to get around the pipes. So it's going to be there. We made the framework on the outside out of 4-inch pipe, and we connected that with spokes of 1-inch solid rods with the 4-inch pipe framework. That is, 4-inch pipe is a compression system, and the sheet metal is a tension system, and they pull together, and that's what gives it the strength. And when it was all finished, we tuned the building. The vertical 1-inch tubes that separate the sheet from the pipe have bolts on them, so we could raise and lower those bolts, so we could tighten up the whole system so that everything was in tension or compression.
Construction of the dome began in early 1958 and started from the ground up. 320 2-ton sub-assembly panels were positioned by crane and welded into place. The growing structure supported itself and was climbable at all times.
When I'd step into this dome, it was like, you know, the most beautiful cathedral in the world. The light coming in there, especially as it grew higher and higher, and always the danger of one of these 10-ton elements falling out of the sky or something. But and that picture reminded me all these cranes reaching up 10 stories, putting the final pieces into place. That's phenomenal. And those are heavy steel structures. I mean, in this day and age, to be standing under those cranes, even with hard hats, I don't see many people in that picture, matter of fact, but they had to put it up and hold it right in place till they welded it. And I thought it was a really dangerous thing, but once it was there, it did seem forever.
When it was completed in October 1958, the Union Tank Car Dome was 120 feet tall and spanned 384 feet. It was the largest clear-span structure in the world.
I was there until the dedication, which Buckminster Fuller spoke, and his ideas for the future and what the buildings that could be made and how they would be used and they would last forever. And this steel structure is 100 years from now to be standing, 1,000 years from now. I mean, it's indestructible.
In some ways, this dome was a structure on par with things like the Brooklyn Bridge and the Eiffel Tower. It's on par with those kinds of innovation. But the problem is that all of those were built for expositions, and they were built to be meaningful. Not only did they have crowds, but they were built in prominent places, and they were built to be harbingers of the future, to be symbols of what technology could do for us. But, you know, this dome was not built like that. You know, it was built, as far as I can tell, because Dick Lear came up with the efficiency of the circle in this one industrial process, and his boss had worked with Fuller, and they could cover it with a sphere cheaper than anything else, and so boom, they did it. You know, so there's no architecture involved in terms of making it intentionally meaningful.
The success of the dome led Dick Lear and Union Tank Car to build a twin structure in Wood River, Illinois, outside of St. Louis.
Later on, when I was asked to build the same thing in Wood River, coming back on a plane one night around 10 o'clock, I was about half asleep, but I thought the greatest strain in a geodesic building is coming from the bottom up to the top. So why not start at the top and go to the bottom?
The one they built in Woods River, they did it all differently. It's really interesting. Now, this one they started at the periphery and kind of built it up. The one there, they started at the top on a big kind of balloon. You have a big rubber balloon they had taped to the inside of it, and they'd put in a layer, and then they'd put air pressure in it, raise it up, and then they'd raise it up.
It took an 1.25 ounces of air pressure to support that 600-ton dome. Well, I was with Union Tank for about 10 years. After this was completed, then I left. It was pretty much my project from beginning to end. I never did at any point have any restrictions, or we did pretty much what we had to do to get the job done.
There's a lot between an idea and a building, and Dick Lair had to invent all the processes, all of the engineering, structural elements. And if anybody's to get credit for the dome, it's Dick Lair.
This is 1/8-inch steel. It was used at the time to actually make tank cars out of. It's part of the exoskeleton. This is the part that was actually holding the dome skin in tension, constructed on site. The pipe came in off the truck, or probably off of a rail car. This piece here is actually the connecting member, which was attached to the skin itself. Again, it was only meant to be a member to hold the structure more rigid over the day.
Well, the dome was over behind that line of trees, and it was actually rose above the trees. Kansas City Southern must be doing some major work. I know that they've actually put 2 tracks where the dome used to be for storage, apparently, of cars.
Over time, the standard size of railroad tank cars changed from 50 feet long to 60 feet. The turntable system could not accommodate them, and the dome was obsolete. In 1990, Union Tank Car sold the dome to the Kansas City Southern Railroad Company.
My understanding is that when Kansas City Southern bought it, they were never interested in the dome. All they were really interested in was the rail yard next to it. Storage and switching yard next to it. That's all they were ever interested in.
It was really kind of random. Somebody had saw my portfolio and saw that I'd taken pictures of old cars and things that were similar to what the Bucky Dome looks like, rusty metal. So they said, "Come with me, I'll take you to this place to take photos." I got there, it was kind of surreal. I had to sort of suspend my thought process and just focus on taking the pictures because it was overwhelmingly surreal,
When you saw it from a long way away, you'd see the whole thing. But the closer you got to it, because of the curvature of the less of it you could see, And finally, when you walked in, you really were seeing a small fraction of it, but it was still huge. And then you walked through, and it was like way bigger than you thought it was going to be. And anybody that has any spatial imagination walks into something like that and says, "Wow, you can do this? Well, what else could you do?"
And if you were down in the dome, looking up at the ceiling, it looked like you were even rusty, like you were on the inside of a diamond.
It's later now that I look back and realize that it's weird to go to some place that looks modern, futuristic, but it's in ruins already.
And of course the tragedy of this one was that once Union Tank Car sold it to Kansas City Southern, since they apparently had no interest in the dome, they didn't keep it up. And because of the way it was built, kind of the structure was the skin, it had to be painted every so many years, you know. I mean, it was built on thin metal. It would rust quickly. And if that thing wasn't sandblasted and painted every 20, 30 years, it wasn't going to last. The last photos of it that I've seen, gaping holes all over the place just from the rust. And it would rust at the joints, and you know, and it would have been impossible to fix. What do you do? You know, you go in and sandblast it and then cut out the metal pieces, and it would have been a nightmare, fortune to fix, you know. That's one of the problems, you could say, of modern architecture in general, is it relies on newer technologies. They have to be maintained. In general, demands more maintenance than old brick buildings, old stone buildings, and that sort of thing. And so you go back to a lot of these sort of icons of modernism, and they don't look very good after 40 years because they haven't been kept up.
As the dome sat rusting away, several interested parties working in conjunction with the Foundation for Historical Louisiana approached Kansas City Southern about purchasing the structure and converting it into another use. These plans ranged from a site for Louisiana State University's nanotechnology facility to a warehouse for storing refined sugar. These offers were all rebuffed. The Foundation was also working behind the scenes with the National Register of Historic Places to get the structure listed, for which it would be eligible when it was 50 years old, in 2008.
You know, at one time, and I think I did it kind of as a stunt, I proposed to the city that we tear it down and move it piece by piece down to the Civic Center site, where we could have made it into an exhibit hall with a couple of 100,000 square feet of exhibit space. And it could be torn down in pieces because it was built in pieces. Only about a mile away is the Mississippi River. So it could have been put on barges and floated down the river and reassembled.
There's always somebody who thinks they're gonna use it. It just never happens.
It was never really a part of the landscape, except sometimes when you would fly into Baton Rouge, you would see it. Most people didn't know what they were seeing and probably didn't even register that it was out of the ordinary, although it was clearly not an oil tank.
Well, you know, it was very isolated where it was built. It was very unknown where it was. I mean, to be a building that was published all around the world and was as significant in certain circles, it was virtually unknown here.
The last time there's any big thing about the dome before it was knocked down was a long time ago. So I don't think many Baton Rougeans even knew it was there. The dome was so far off the beaten path, it wasn't on the radar of very many people.
Many people visited the dome, legally and illegally. At one point, a trespassing youth was climbing the central tower inside the dome and fell to his death. To limit their liability, Kansas City Southern heightened security and guarded the site. Finally, in November 2007, 1 year from when it could have been listed on the National Register of Historic Places, the railroad secretly applied for a demolition permit from the city of Baton Rouge, which was approved. It cost $227.50 to file the permit, which was classified as a neighborhood improvement.
The railroad referred to the geodesic dome, but it did not call it a geodesic dome. I think it called it a dome-like structure. It made no reference to Buckminster Fuller.
Demolition began over the quiet Thanksgiving holiday weekend.
Instead of cooperating with the efforts of many working on the Kansas City Southern Railway,
has destroyed our motorway. The failure of the Department of Public Works has maliciously raised no warning. They wiped out our most important structure. Cynically, they took arrogance of bureaucratic corporations and government, and while no one was looking, and raised money. Stamped across the permit were the words, the catastrophe is remember the Bucky Dome.
If Kansas City Southern had called a press conference and said, we have to take the dome down. We hate to do it, but we have to take the dome down. And then invited newspaper and television out there to witness the demolition, people would have mourned the dome's passing, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. It would have been a media event and then gone. But because Kansas City Southern took it down without telling anybody, it became a cause celeb for a while.
First of all, one of my father's philosophies was that there were never failures, that everything was just a learning process. I think what he would have been disappointed about would be that they simply put the metal into a scrap pile.
Yeah, I think it's kind of sad that it comes down. I guess it had to do with the length of rail cars, and it doesn't fit anymore. And things move along, and the old things don't fit anymore. But that's what we call progress, isn't it?